Well, look who's back. It takes a brave soul to seek an audience with the ghost host. That's a decision you might live to regret. Let's see if your courage is still intact after tonight's stories. Our first story comes from an OP that had one hell of an encounter when she was 16. It's called An Unexplained Experience When I Was 16.
When I was around 16, I woke up one night to go to the bathroom. The bathroom door was across the hall from my bedroom, with the main bedroom at the end of the hall. I got out of bed and was only thinking of going to do my business and coming back to bed. When I stepped out into the hall, though, I was overcome with a sense of dread, like something was coming up behind me, and fast. It was not the first time I had that feeling in the hall. I had experienced it many times over the years, sometimes daytime, sometimes night. There was never any reasoning as to why I would sometimes get that feeling, and as soon as you would step out of the hall into another room, the feeling would go away. This night, I just did the usual and hurried quickly into the bathroom and went to close the door behind me, but it wouldn't close. It stopped about an inch from closing, like something was blocking it from moving further. My first thought was it was likely my dad. He must have been on the way to the bathroom too, coming from the main room, explained why I thought someone was behind me, and was now playing one of his jokes. I couldn't have been more wrong. I opened the door to see a dark hooded shape with bright yellow eyes looking straight at me. The skin was dark and had a similar texture as the skin on a bird's foot. I went to slam the door, but it still wouldn't close. I tried opening it a small way and slamming it a few times before I noticed there was something sticking in near the latch. It looked like a scaly, misshapen finger with a long black nail. I tried slamming it a few more times until the finger finally withdrew. I quickly locked the door. That is when the whole door started to shake. Over the next 20 to 30 minutes, I heard it speaking in my mother's voice. At first, nicely asking for me to open the door, but quickly turning nasty, saying things my mother would never say. Even the way it gradually faded away, sounding like it was going off into the distance, didn't make sense. Once the door stopped shaking and my mother's voice was gone, after about 5 minutes when I was trying to calm myself down, I left the bathroom. The house felt calm. I looked into my parents' room and saw they were both asleep. Then I went back to my room and hoped for the best. Nothing else happened that night, or anything even close, ever again. I don't know if it was a dream. It didn't feel like it. Everything was as it really was, with no strange little differences you expect in a dream. And also, while I had been in the bathroom, I had tried to move a big wooden cabinet full of shampoo bottles and other things my mom had stocked up on and was unable to move it even a bit. The next day I tried to move it again with the same result. I had never tried to move it before. To this day I don't know what it was, but it's an experience I'll never forget. I had commented this in another post, but wanted to see if anyone else has had similar experiences.
Jeez, that sounds terrifying. If that happened to me in the bathroom, I probably would start doing my business outside, like nature intended. Of course, my neighbors probably wouldn't be too happy about it. Next, we got one from a cabbie that from time to time gets unwanted passengers.
I'm a taxi driver on weekend nights, and I've seen some things. The first time I encountered something when I drove by an old cemetery during Christmas a couple years ago. One minute I'm alone in the car, and when I drive by the old cemetery, I noticed a shadow in the rear view mirror. I turned on the lights and saw an old lady sitting in the middle back seat. I knew something was off and decided just to ask where she wanted to go and got no response. I asked a second time and still no response. I just turned the free light off and just drove around for a few minutes, looked back, and sure enough, she was gone. The second time was a week after on New Year's Eve when I drove by the same cemetery. An old lady waved me to stop and climbed in the back seat. I asked her where to, and she said just to the old part of town. We drove for a few minutes, not a big town, and when we got to the old part of town, I looked back and there was no one there. I have a few other stories from coworkers, such as feeling long hair glazing their face mid-drive, seeing a man with no arms nor legs suddenly appearing in the back, and some customers asking who the person is in the back. Have fellow taxi or Uber drivers gone through similar things?
You know what? That's the biggest problem. I bet cabs and Uber drivers have with picking up ghosts. They always get stiffed for the fare. Our next one comes from a dude that because of one fateful night, he had to quit his job. It's entitled, "The Reason I Don't Deliver Pizza Anymore."
A few weeks back, I was talking with some friends about past jobs and why we left them. It was after a few rounds of conversation, I had a memory resurface about an encounter I had on the road while I was delivering pizza. I wrote it down in my notes as soon as I could. This was about the beginning of fall, maybe start of winter. Things were just about to get cold in Texas. It was getting late, and the sun was setting, and I got an order for a delivery down a dirt road to a farmhouse. No big deal, as I took these sort of orders all the time. I was no stranger to off-the-usual track orders. As I'm driving, I glanced between my map and the road and noticed that this little dirt road was an offshoot of this main road that was under construction at the time. It was a bit difficult to spot at first, but I found it and drove down into the unpaved, packed dirt roads. At the time, I was driving a Mazda, and it wasn't made for these sorts of conditions, so it was bumpy all the way through. The road itself was one of those winding dirt paths through a small thicket of trees, just your average backcountry road. I didn't really pay my surroundings much attention, as I was pretty well adjusted to creepy roads at this point, as living in a rural part of North Texas had desensitized me to dark, creepy roads. I arrived at the house shortly after, which was at the bottom of this steep hill. I parked on the top of it, right in front of the stop sign, thinking I wouldn't be long. I made my way down with the pizza, leaving my car on as I always do. I reach the door, ring the doorbell, and give the guy his food. He was a nice man, a little reserved from what I remember. I turned to leave, and when I looked back up to the top of the hill, I saw what I can only describe as a shadow figure. Its shape, only barely human, peeking out from behind the stop sign at me. As soon as it noticed me watching it, it ducked and ran in front of my car. I could see the lights of my car dim slightly, as if something passed in front of it. Immediately, I got a cold feeling in my stomach and turned around and ran. I got in my car, checked to see if anything was in the back seat, and put my foot down without looking back. I made it out onto the main road and back to the pizza place, where I took a very long bathroom break in order to think about what I just saw. Now, it could have just been an animal or my imagination. But I'll never forget that shape. It was like a human, but built all wrong, jagged, dark edges. I never could see any eyes, but I knew from the bottom of my soul that it was watching me. A few months later, I quit, claiming that college was getting too much to handle. I still drive by that dirt road every so often. I refuse to go back down it ever again.
Well, if there was ever a good reason to quit a job, that would be it. Next, we have one that is from a skeptic, who still remains a skeptic even after she has a close encounter of the horrifying kind. It's called, "I don't believe in the paranormal, but I can't explain it."
We recently lost our home due to Hurricane Milton. We were lucky in the fact that my husband's uncle's house was available. Unfortunately, his wife died a few years ago, and he unexpectedly passed away a few months ago. Despite this, I had no qualms. I'm a skeptic. This was never even a possibility in my mind. So my family moved in. Me, husband, kids, and my mother. My mom went to visit my brother for 2 weeks, and my husband was out of state for work. I sleep during the day because I work late. My kids also do on school breaks because they stay up late. 2 days ago, I woke up at 2:30 p.m. feeling weird. I heard my American Akita growling. She has never barked in her life. No one knows why, but I heard her and looked down the hallway to see her. Maybe 2 minutes after I woke up. Not seconds. I was completely awake. From my side of the bed, if I lean out from the edge, I can see down the hall, through the dining room, into my living room. As soon as I did, I saw something solid. Like a person had blocked out the light. go across the entrance to my living room. I thought it was a person. I saw they must have been 7.5 feet tall. So I immediately grabbed my gun and ran out there. The place they walked to is only a tiny corner. It's where my Christmas tree is. I thought there was a person hiding there. I go out and no one is there. I am 100% sure of what I saw. I was still not asleep. So I go check to see all 3 of my kids are still in bed. None of them are 7 feet tall anyway. But my birds are going insane. My dog is growling and my heart is pounding. I thought I had an intruder in my house. There is no way the person could have escaped. I never took my eyes off that doorway. They couldn't have moved. So I walk back to my room, and I'm terrified. I sit on the edge of my bed, leaned over looking down the hall. About 30 seconds later, the TV and light in my closet flashed off quickly. I thought maybe I was wrong, and I just blinked too long because I was scared. About 10 seconds later, the power flashed off and on 4 times. But the weird thing is this, the TV came back on and YouTube was still on. When my power goes off at my old place, it would always turn off the Roku. This time it did not. At that point, I was thinking of running outside and not coming back in ever again. But my kids were asleep in their rooms. So I just sat here, panicking for hours. I had to even cover the mirrors in my room. 'Cause after that, everything made me panic. Every flash from TV to the mirror, etc. Nothing has happened since, but I'm losing it. I can't help but constantly stare down the hallway terrified. I'm doing it now. I don't believe in it at all, but I'm 100% sure I saw something. It wasn't black. It seemed to look like a person with clothes on. My husband and daughters have a New Year's trip planned, and I'm supposed to stay here with my 10-year-old, and I'm not sure I can. I always wished I could have proof. I don't know what this was, but I don't want it anymore.
Wait, even after you've seen what you did, you still remain a skeptic? Well, just remember the old saying, seeing is believing. Well, that's almost all she wrote for another video. I mean, you can't possibly need another one. What, you do? Come on guys, everybody needs their sleep. Well, maybe not me, but you know what I mean. Okay, fine, one more story, just for you. It's from a woman that wants to tell us her own story. It's called Story Time, since y'all like ghosts.
On a warm summer evening, my then 10-year-old son and I went to the gas station and to run a couple of errands. I left my son in the car for a quick minute and ran into the store to prepay the pump. After I'd pumped the gas, I got into the car and my son says, "Mom, this weird lady was driving around the parking lot and she was staring at me." I immediately felt very protective of my boy. Some necessary backstory. My grandmother, Mom's mom, had a very tragic life and sadly lost her only son at about 5 years old. He caught strep that traveled to his kidneys and couldn't be helped. This was back in the day of doctors making house calls, so my mom says she remembers hearing the adults say, "Who's going to give him the shot?" Morphine likely to put him down. My uncle's name was Tommy. My oldest son, Giovanni, bears a huge resemblance to my Uncle Tommy, to the point people see Tommy's photo and think it's a present-day antique photo of my son. Okay, back to it. So now my son and I are driving to the ATM, about 1,000 feet from the gas station we were just at with the creepy lady. I pull up to the ATM and lo and behold, this woman followed me from the gas station. She pulls up next to my car on the passenger side and stares at my son. I open his window enough to be heard and ask, "Can I help you?" This woman is older and clearly has psych issues, but she's with it enough to look at my child and ask, "Is that Tommy?" My heart jumped into my throat, but all I said was, "No, honey, that's Gio." She didn't say another word. She drove off, and that was it. I did notice she drove a dark green sedan, which ironically was the same color car my late grandmother drove. When I got home, I immediately told my mother what had happened, and her jaw dropped. She said, well, it would make sense for my mother to be looking for Tommy. My grandmother had passed away about a decade before when this incident occurred. There is absolutely no way to explain this. My grandmother, Mom, and Tommy all lived in Illinois, not Connecticut where we live today. My mom says that Tommy got another chance through my son, and I like to think she's right, but that was a really, really creepy experience.
Well, all I can really say about it is I hope she finds her son. So, how are you holding up? Do you feel that your courage is waning a bit? Do you think that you may even have to keep looking over your shoulder on the way home to make sure that nothing that goes bump in the night gets the drop on you? Well, I know of something you can do to protect yourself. All you have to do is hit like, subscribe, and share this video. It'll really help us keep the ghosts at bay. And, of course, if any of you have a story to share, or have any thoughts about our stories tonight, or if you have any suggestions on subjects for upcoming videos, or even just general thoughts about my channel, then by all means, drop me a line in the comments. But I do want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope the stories we told won't be giving you too many bad dreams. But if they do, then maybe you shouldn't run from them. After all, sometimes it's better to embrace your nightmares.